I'm your host, Jason Tartick, and welcome to Trading Secrets. We talk all things money on this podcast, and we're teaching all the stuff we just weren't taught in the classroom. Nothing supports this show more than liking, commenting, and of course, subscribing. Welcome back to another episode of Trading Secrets. Today, we are joined by professional wrestler, mixed martial artist, and former WWE Women's Tag Team Champion, where she performs under the ring name Sonya Deville, Daria Berenato. Daria rose to prominence as a contestant in the 2015 season of WWE Tough Enough. Following her elimination, she signed a contract with the WWE, where she then performed under the WWE's development brand NXT before moving to the main roster. She has spent the better part of her last 8 years making her mark in WWE's Raw and SmackDown brands. One of her biggest moments might have been in 2015 when she came out as the WWE's first openly gay female wrestler in an episode of Tough Enough. And she is now married to her wife, Toni, earlier this year. Daria, thank you so much for being on Trading Secrets.
Wow, that was a very impressive intro.
I'll
Thanks for
take-
having me on.
Absolutely. And this is a little near and dear to my heart because I am a big WWE fan. I have friends.
Are you?
Oh, big time. Since day one. I
No
love it.
way.
Oh yeah, I love it. And I had the Bella twins on,
Yes.
and it's been so much fun just following everything and still staying tied to it. So congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. Have you been to a show in recent years?
So I run a talent management agency and I do content creation myself. So I partnered with them
Right.
for WrestleMania in Tampa, and then I was out at WrestleMania in LA.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, we'll have to get you out to another show soon.
Absolutely. And then we've also had Titus O'Neil on this podcast. Now with
He's
Titus,
great.
he's the best. He's the best.
He's the best.
We went into a lot of his childhood and a lot of his traumas that led him to the WWE.
Yeah.
But where I go with your episode is going to be like a little different, right? So I think first and foremost, we've definitely never had anyone with MMA background. And so you began training at, it looks like, the age of 16. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious, I listened to one of your other podcasts and you talked a little bit about the training process and how you were involved in sports and soccer and lacrosse, but you wanted something that could go above and beyond high school and that you could see a
Mhm.
career. I'm not sure that many 16-year-olds out there are like, you know what? Is going to be MMA. So I'm curious, why did you think MMA would be the answer for long-term professional growth?
Yeah, I don't know if I was like naive or just like I knew something before I knew something, but I don't know, I saw a path in it. This was obviously pre Ronda Rousey, but there was girls in MMA making waves to a degree. Prior to them being allowed in the UFC, they were fighting in Elite FC and Strike Force, and I was like fascinated by it. I was like, "Oh my god." I always loved being active. I loved being an athlete, but the sports I was playing, I was like mediocre at, subpar at best. So I was like, "Okay, I'm not going to college for these things. I'm not going to pursue professional sports in this way, but I wanted to be active." And so I was like, "Oh, women's MMA, I could fight. I'm a fighter." And I just felt like there was something to be made out of it. I always was a hustler and I always was very career driven and, passion driven. I was in high school hating school and wanting to graduate so I can like move on to the real world. And that's kind of just always where my mind was at. And so when I saw like Gina Carano fighting and Chris Cyborg, and they were just these badass females just, you know, taking names and traveling all over the world training. And I kind of followed them through. Back then it was just Facebook really, and just like followed their journey. And I was like, I think I can do this. I want to do this.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Now, we know in the MMA world, at least we've explored it a little bit on this podcast, that the prize pools are increasing substantially, but in general, the prize pools are relatively small when you compare to other professional sports at pay-per-views with that magnitude. So in a career from, it looks like you had 3 fights and you're 2-1. Like, can
Mhm.
you make money early on in MMA, or are you spending more than you're making because of coaching? Like, what do the financials
Yeah.
look like early on in the sport?
No, you're broke until you make it. And it's like, even now, it's like it's getting better, but it's like, unless you like the Ronda Rouseys, the Conor McGregors are making the money. The people that understand the value in like branding and really making a name for yourself. Obviously, you have to be an incredible athlete and you have to be good at what you're doing, but they also understood the other side of the coin, which was like you need a brand. You need people to want to come see you fight, not just because you're a good technical fighter, but also there's an entertainment value and an entertainment factor, which is so fascinating because you see that in MMA now, but of course that's always been the case in WWE. And so there's so many crossovers that make sense for, I think, pretty much everything, with content creation. Like there's got to be something about you that draws me to your page, not just giving me great information. I want to watch you. And so I think, yeah, money is getting better, but when you're starting out in MMA and you're an amateur, there is no money to be made. I mean, I got like, I think $400 for my first fight, a couple $100 for the second one. You get like a small percentage of ticket sales depending on the promoter. So I was bartending the entire time. It's not a career until you really, make it big. And a lot of people still in the UFC work another job. So yeah, I think it's one of those things. If you're the top 10% and you're killing it, you're killing it. But it's a little bit of feast or famine.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to hear about the dichotomy between entertainment, like in WWE, versus the actual, I guess you would call it the sport of MMA. And what's
Right.
interesting is WWE has been so ahead of its time as branding individuals to become entertainers. And I think athletes have been so behind their time, only focusing on their sport. And now you're actually starting to see this crazy switch where
Yep.
individuals will brand from college to professional sports and they're becoming bigger than the actual sport they're playing. Or you're seeing
Yeah.
people that were fourth liners that never got any time but have this crazy personality that's entertaining make more money than some of the starters with brand opportunities. Question I have for you as a former WWE tag team champion and all the success you've had, when you were fighting in MMA and you saw $400 you're getting paid, what was your vision then? We see where you've gone, we see what you're
Yeah.
doing, and we have a good idea of your trajectory, but like, where was your professional vision then? How were you going to make money in a sport that you were making $400? What was the thought process?
So, two things. I was out in LA training MMA and I've always wanted to be an actress. So I was like, I want to be an actress
Mm.
and I want to be an MMA fighter. So my goal with MMA was to get to the UFC, to be a woman in the UFC, to be the Ronda Rousey, to be the next Ronda Rousey, and to just take over. I was like, I'm going to make a name for myself. But simultaneously, I was pursuing this path of hosting and television and film. And so it didn't matter to me kind of what took off first. I was always wanting to do both. And so I was like, I'm going to bartend and I'm going to hustle until something works out. And, I have a really strong sense of like faith. And I think everything happens for a reason. And I have a really strong belief in that. And I think if you put in the right work and you're doing like the tangible everyday things that are leading to your bigger goal, things will come. Right. So it's like I never said no to anything in you know how it is in LA. I was like bartending, I'd meet this person. They'd be like, "Oh, do you want to come on this podcast? Do you want to try hosting on this?" And like one thing just led to another. And next thing you know, I was hosting on AfterBuzz TV, which is owned by Maria Menounos, former E! News host. And so I became great friends with her and her husband. And they called me one day and they were like, "What do you think about WWE?" And I was like, "Oh, like fake fighting?" And they were like, "No, no, no, it's not like that. You gotta check it out." And I was like, "All right, let me see what it's all about." And so I did my research. I didn't grow up watching wrestling and I fell in love. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, nobody told me that the two passions I already had were, culminating in this world that I had no idea about." And so when I watched WWE and a couple episodes of Total Divas and everything, I was like, "Oh, that's where I want to be."
I love it. It's wild how just one opportunity leads to the next, leads to the
Yeah.
next. There is no blueprint in today's world. It's like a definition of a mosaic. You go fighting MMA, you go 2-1. I heard the story on a podcast you told about your last story. You're put to sleep, knocked out. All of a sudden, it's you getting knocked out on an MMA floor in LA that leads you to become a podcast host, which then leads you to become connected with people from E! News, which gets you then on Tough Enough. So Tough Enough is the reality show or
Yeah.
competitive show, we should call it,
Wait, I
competition
have
show.
to correct you. I was never knocked out.
You were? On
N
your podcast, I heard
I
you said you were put to sleep.
I think you're combining 2 stories. So, I was
Okay,
I was put to sleep when I was 16 and I first started in my gym in a
got it.
competition, and then I came back later that night and won first place against the kid that put me to sleep.
Hell yeah,
So
shit.
that's a good one, but then my last fight was a split decision loss.
Okay, I
So
am
my
glad you
only loss
corrected
in
me there.
MMA was split decision loss. I I have to protect my ego there.
Protect the ego, get the facts correct. All right, I'm glad you fact checked me there.
But go
But
ahead.
it's that experience that leads you to, of all things, hosting, which then of all things leads you to WWE's Tough Enough show, which I think is so interesting in today's world. I think people that get stuck in their careers get so focused on like ladder, and it's not ladder. It's going to be a mosaic. But Tough Enough calls you. What's the casting process look like for something like that?
So Maria and Kevin call me and they're like, would you do this thing tough enough? And I'm like, oh, it's a competition show? Like, hell yeah. Like, that's right up my alley. And they had asked Maria to do it. And Maria was like, I don't want to wrestle. Like, no, I don't want to get beat up. I don't want to do all this, but I have the perfect girl. And so she convinced them to do a Zoom interview with me. And so I did the Zoom interview and they were very honest with me on the phone. They were like, listen, we have like 11,000 people that tried out for this. We'll give you a call if we think it fits, but we're not going to force it, whatever. And I was like, no, totally, I understand. And so I didn't think anything of it. And I didn't think I was going to get a call. And so then weeks went by and finally I get a phone call and they're like, hey, they loved your interview and they'd love to fly you out for the physical portion of the tryout. And I was like, oh, fly me where? And they were like, we're going to fly you to Orlando. And I was like broke living in LA, supporting myself on bartender tips really. And I was like, "Oh, you're just gonna fly me to Orlando?" And so I had my MMA coaches like put me through like crazy hell week training to prep me for whatever this tryout had to bring. And yeah, I got there. I think it's like a 4-day tryout. It consists of like running the ropes, learning how to take a back bump, a lot of cardio inducive things. They really just want to see like,
What's a back bump?
oh, it's purposely falling on your back and smacking the mat as hard as you can. So it's everything unnatural to the human body. Like, in MMA, you try not to fall over or get knocked down, but obviously there's a certain amount of choreography that goes into WWE. It's more like I always tell people, I'm like, you have to be like a gymnast, you have to be a fighter, you have to be an actor, you have to be a live performer. Like there's so much that goes into it that you like can't appreciate unless you watch it and you go to a show. Like, yeah, so I'm doing all this crazy stuff and luckily I was in great shape. So that was great. I killed it. But then we got to the other portion of the trial, which was like the interview portion. And then we had to cut a promo, which in acting would be like a monologue, but like
Yeah.
you just have to like off the cuff, like come up with a promo and act like you're a character already in the WWE. And so all of that was like very new to me in the sense of like being a WWE superstar and my knowledge of the world was so new. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And then, yeah, I went through the trial and they were like, you got on the show. It was 13 people out of 11,000.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Let's back up to 13 people out of 11,000. There are people listening to this podcast that will be stepping into interviews where they're going against 4 people. There will be people that are stepping into dates in which they get nervous. 11,000 people, and you do that interview. What do you think you did during that interview to differentiate where they said, we want to go and take you through the physical test? Because 13 out of 11,000 are quite the odds.
I think I was just so obliviously organic. Like I was just me. And I really didn't understand the magnitude of what I was doing in the moment. I was 20 years old, super passionate, super motivated. And I just was like, I have nothing to give you but me. And there was times like throughout the trial where I was like looking around at the other girls and a lot of them were like bikini models, swimsuit models. I didn't fit in by any means. I was this Jersey girl that moved herself to LA to try to make it as a fighter. I was rough around the edges and I really didn't think I was going to get on the show, but I knew I was a good athlete. I knew I had something different to offer and I was like, well, if these differences are what they're looking for, then hell yeah, I'm going to get this. But it's just like what cup of tea do they want? And it ended up being in a time where they were trying to really legitimize the women's division and bring in more athletes and more legit fighters and go in that direction. So I guess timing is everything. But with anything you do, like you got to just blindly believe in yourself because no one's going to believe in you until you believe in you. So it's like one of those things where ignorance is bliss sometimes.
I love it. I know through hosting auditions or castings or even
Yeah.
through reality TV auditions, there were some obscure questions that I was asked. Some I'll never forget. In that process, can you remember like just a ridiculous question or something that was an outlier that stuck with you?
Well, yeah, Triple H, no big deal, asked
No
me
big
if
deal.
I was in a relationship, which seemingly is like a very easy, normal question on a reality show, but I wasn't out at the time. I was still in the closet and I had a longtime girlfriend back in LA. And so I like froze. And you like, if you go back and watch the clip, I laugh at myself now because I'm like, oh my God, I was so like, did not know what to say and did not expect that question. And so I got nervous and I was like, yeah, I have a girlfriend, whatever. And I just like stuttered for 5 seconds. And then he was like, did you just come out? And I was like, nobody knows this yet. And then it ended up being a clip that went viral for years to come and kind of followed me through the beginning of my career. And it ended up being a great thing. I was very nervous at first and I was like, what the hell did I just do? Was that a mistake? Like, I really was unsure of myself at that point. I was 20 years old and only open to like my mom and my dad. So that was very scary, but it turned out to be a great thing. And I think it was a voice for a lot of people that were going through the same thing at the time. So
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's just another example of like when you can break your walls down and showcase vulnerability, the
yeah,
amount of connection it could create and opportunity and empowerment is huge. It's exciting, and I'm
which
so
I'm
happy that
like so not good at. So
happened.
the
Yeah.
fact it's kind of just I had no choice. I either was gonna lie or tell the truth. So yeah, it just happened so weird.
I guess when Triple H is staring you down, you just tell him the truth. It's
Yeah,
simple
it
to
was like,
do. I
oh
would
my
do
God.
the same.
And then I'm thinking, like, if I lie right now on national television, then I go home to my girlfriend, she's like, "Why'd you say you were single?"
Of
Because the question was
course.
like, "Are you in a relationship?" So I either had to say it or not say it. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, I think about WWE, and I also, in my head, I just kind of compare it to like a weird dotted line to Broadway. The one thing I think about Broadway that is so impressive is not only are these people acting, not only are they dancing at the highest level, not are they singing at the highest level, they're doing it live on stage. It's like the culmination of all three, in which one individual within space of art or entertainment can make a whole career out of one of those. I find it the same in WWE. There's entertainment, like you said, there's acting, there's your promo, there's also the physical element of all those. The acting, the mic work, the promos, the actual fighting, which for you was the hardest?
So that's a tough question. So when I first got there, the physicality came fairly natural. I felt like having the fight background and the experience in sports in general definitely helped. It helped with footwork, it helped with like, just knowing how to move your body in ways that looked athletic or physically, endurance.
How physical, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No, you're good.
I don't want you to go down the line to me to forget this because it's so important. Everyone thinks WWE, and the biggest word they'll say is fake, but
Yeah.
like there's some shit going on. I've been to matches where
Yeah.
an NBA, like literally a guy, I'll never forget this. I was live. There's LA WrestleMania cage match. The guy is just gushing blood everywhere. They
Yeah.
did something with TV. Guy comes in and they staple his head so he finishes the match,
Yeah.
and they didn't show that on TV. How physical is it actually compared to the conception that people just use the word fake?
I tell everyone I am like the perfect example. I did not come from wrestling. I did not grow up watching wrestling. And now I've been here for 10 years and it is a dream come true. And it's the greatest industry in the world. I have been more injured in pro wrestling than my 6 years of training and fighting mixed martial arts. Not
That's
to
crazy.
say you can't get severely injured in both. Of course you can. But with MMA, it's like the most common injuries are going to be, black eyes, bloody noses, bumps and bruises, right? For the most part. In pro wrestling, a common injury is, torn ACL, or do you do a moonsault off the top and you land short and you land on your neck and you hurt your neck? A lot of spine, a lot of like, there's so much physicality that goes into it. Obviously, we spend so much time and effort practicing it and getting it down so that we do it in a way that we cannot get injured. But I tore my ACL last year, have been stitched on this eyebrow and this eyebrow from being cut open. Never in MMA, only in professional wrestling. So I always tell the haters out there, I'm like, trust me, I've done both. WWE is a very, very physical sport.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so the physical breakdown came natural for you. Which
Yeah.
was the hardest?
So the promo at first was difficult. Yes, I had acting experience and I always knew I could get there, but it was finding a character was difficult for me because it was like I was just so simple-minded. I was like, I am who I am. Like I'm an MMA fighter. I'm a badass. And I didn't know how to like translate that to the audience or what to show them more than what I was. I was like, I just am what I am. Yeah, I think I was just a little bit simple-minded, and so it took years of, like, really developing my character. Who do I wanna be? Because the cool thing about WWE is you don't have to be who you are in real life. You can be whoever you wanna be, whoever you think the fans are gonna connect with, whoever you think the audience can gravitate towards and understand or hate and boo. So it's like you kinda get to, like, create, which became my favorite part and now is probably one of my favorite things in wrestling.
Awesome. So cool. Well, you finish 11th in Tough Enough. To go on Tough Enough and to finish 11th, is there any type of payment for something like that?
You get paid while you're on the show weekly. I don't remember exactly what it was. I wanna say like $1,000 a week or something while you're there, but then, like, once you're gone, you're gone. So I went like, I flew home the day I got eliminated, and then I went back to training wrestling the next day. I had called WWE and said, "Where can I train professional wrestling in LA?" And they were like, they gave me a school. I went to the school, and that's where I trained every single day while I was like blowing up WWE's email, like, hire me, hire me. But they had told me as soon as I got eliminated, like, we're gonna hire you. But I didn't believe them. I was like, no way. I was like, I'm gonna fly back home. I'm gonna go back to bartending. I'm go back to reality. And the dream's gonna be over. The thing that I just fell in love with is gonna be over. And so I was adamant about staying on top of learning how to wrestle and staying on top of them to hire me. And sure enough, like 3 months later, I got the call.
For those training schools, does WWE put them in, or do you have to pay for them? And if so, you have to pay for them. Like, what is a training school for like
So
wrestling
we
cost?
have the WWE has the WWE Performance Center. So once you're with WWE under their umbrella, you go to NXT, which is our developmental brand, and you train at the Performance Center in Orlando. And that's the only place that you train when you're in WWE. Unless like your friend has a ring or you know someone with a ring, you can go get in some extra reps. That's fine too. But if you're not in WWE, there's just independent wrestling schools all over the country of, you know, people wrestling on different circuits. And so they knew Brian Kendrick, who had worked for WWE previously. He had a school in LA, so they were friendly with him. So they kind of like sent me there. I think they may have paid for it for the first couple weeks, like because they knew they were going to hire me. So then they called me back and they were like, "Okay, fly to Orlando." I actually had to do another tryout. They made me do another whole tryout, even though I had already tried out for Tough Enough.
Wow. Okay. So you do Tough Enough, you train for a little bit, you then do another tryout, and then you get signed as a WWE NXT. You're not signed as a superstar. You have to actually work up to get the title superstar, correct?
So, well, you're a superstar. You're on NXT in the developmental brand, trying to make it one day to Monday Night Raw or SmackDown.
Okay.
But now NXT has evolved. This was back 10 years ago. NXT has now evolved to like being a brand of its own. NXT is debuting on CW. Monday Night Raw is going to Netflix January, and SmackDown's going to USA. So all three shows are on major platforms, and millions are watching around the world. So, yeah, back when I was there, it was a little bit different. It was a little bit more of like strictly developmental. You go there to learn how to wrestle, and then from there, you either get fired or you move up to Raw or SmackDown.
Okay. So you were making 400 bucks fighting in MMA, you get signed with NXT. How does it compare?
Well, it was a steady paycheck. It was my first salary job. So I was like so excited. I thought I was rich. I was like going from bartending, making like $100 in tips a night to a steady paycheck to me was like the end all be all. I thought I like made it. So I would have signed any contract they gave me. Yeah, I was pretty stoked.
Do those contracts, does it work like a salary? Like you get an annual like payment, or is it you get paid per show? Like what's a structure of a
Yeah,
contract?
it's annual. You
Okay, so
just
you get
paid
locked in
weekly.
for a year, kind of.
Yep.
Okay, and then you'll have the option, like a renewal option or a promotion option, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, they can cut you within that contract. They can
Okay.
give you a raise. They can do whatever they want. You can do whatever.
Okay. The notes I have here is that April 17, you're signed as an NXT superstar, and then in November 2017, so that's literally like 5, 6 months later, you're signed to the WWE brand. That feels like a very, very fast track. What
No.
happened?
So
Is that incorrect?
yeah, so I signed with NXT in September of 2015,
Okay.
and then November of 2017, I debuted on Monday Night Raw.
Okay.
2 years.
So Within that 2-year time period, what specifically are Triple H and the executives of WWE looking for? Or what even analytics connected to like your Q rating or anything like that are they saying, okay, she's good enough, let's bring her up? What does that look like?
I think it's different for everyone because I think timing is the biggest thing in WWE. It's like, what do they need? Do they need a good guy? Do they need a bad guy? Are they looking, like what are they looking for? I was definitely coming up in a time where it was normal to be in developmental for 4 or 5 years. So I didn't know how long I was gonna be down there. And when I got the call, like, "You're gonna debut on Monday Night Raw," I was like, "What?" Like, I was shocked because I was still very novice compared to, all there is to learn in wrestling. I mean, I still feel green. I still feel like I have so much to learn. It's just like a forever evolving business. But I got the call and I was like, "Wait, what? Me?" But it was at a time where they were really focusing in on like legitimizing the women's division. And I think they liked that I had the fight background and I knew how to move and throw punches. And so, yeah, I came up in a group with my best friend Mandy and my good friend Paige. And that was it.
Okay. What I'm interested in is when you get that call, if
Mhm.
I look at like the minimum contract in the NHL, it's like 750K. And I have a buddy who used to be a backup goalie and goalie of the AHL. So
Mhm.
whenever he got called to just be like literally third string, he wouldn't even have to have a sweat. It was a
Yeah.
big day for him because that day, that game, he's paid off that 750K minimum. When you go from NXT to WWE Raw, do they give you a big bump in pay? Is it just for that episode? Does your whole contract change? How
Yeah.
does that look?
You get signed on a new contract. It's a main roster contract is what it was considered. And yeah, it's a significant bump. So that day you get the call, you're not only excited to debut on TV, but you're like, "Oh, my life's about to change to a degree." Yeah.
Crazy. And I've heard in the, Logan Paul has talked about it in depth, and there's been a lot of wrestlers that have talked about it. It's almost like it's tough to break into the culture because it's such a hard business. Did you find when you went from NXT to WWE Monday Night Raw, like in the locker room, they're a little tougher on you? It's tough to break in. Are the nerves higher from a career navigation standpoint? Was that a big shock?
I feel like I've always been a people person and I can kind of get along with just about everybody. And the locker room at the time, it's so different because like when I got in the locker room, it was like Nikki and Brie, Bella, the Bella twins were still there. Paige was there. Like a lot of the old school girls were still there, but then you had a lot of fresh faces too that I knew from my time in NXT because we were down there together. So like it was kind of a mix of like the old and the new. And I mean, everyone was great. As cliche as it sounds, it was like a lot of unity because the girls were like banding together at this point in time specifically to create what then went on to be the women's evolution. We were all kind of like, we're over women having 30-second matches. We're over the BS and we're all kind of fighting for the same thing. So it kind of like unified us in the sense of we all want to be bigger, we all want to be better, and we all want the respect and attention that women deserve. So I felt like there was a lot of unity. I didn't think it was tough. It is a specific culture, but I came to NXT when I was 20. So
Yeah.
I kind of grew up in it.
Yeah.
I'm about to be 31 in like 2 weeks. So like I've been here for a decade. So I kind of feel like I came up in the culture. So when you're introduced to the culture in NXT, it kind of preps you for what's to come on Raw and SmackDown.
Then you also earn your stripes in not only a decade in the business, but becoming a tag team champion, being featured on big pay-per-view events.
Yep.
When you get that, it seems like everyone is fighting. I mean, at least trying to like read the situation. Everyone's fighting for the Royal Rumble, for the WrestleMania, for the championship spotlight. Is that because there's such significance in when that happens for your brand? Or is there also bonuses and incentives, like you see some NFL players that got scored that last touchdown of the year because they get paid more. Talk to me about that.
So I think with WWE, the way you get to the top of the pay scale is if you put butts in seats, that's how you move up. So whatever you think within your creative wheelhouse, within your creative mind, like what can you do? What do you have to offer to get you to the top of the card? Because you're at the top of the card, you're at the top of the pay scale, your brand grows, like it all goes together. Like whatever your thing is, you just need to find it and try to be the best at it and hope that that gets you to the top of the card. I always use The Miz as an example because He's so good at talking, right? He's so good on the mic. And when he grabs the mic, it's like you hate him because he's a bad guy most of the time, but like you want to hear what he has to say still. And he's done such a good job of making an amazing career out of that. But then you see guys in the ring that are doing double backflips off the top rope and you're like, "Oh my God," and you're captivated by that. So like whatever your thing is, it's your job along the journey of being a WWE superstar to like figure that out and find it and get to the top of the card, meaning sell tickets.
That's one of the crazy things about that industry. Unlike any industry in the world, it doesn't matter if you're the most liked or the most hated, whether you're the booed the loudest or cheered on the loudest. Those that are considered, I believe you guys refer to it as the heel, the person who is actually booed the most, could be considered the most successful individual and brand in the franchise. That's correct, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Now, does that knowing that like being the bad guy actually can help your business, does it still mentally work against you when you have the entire crowd like literally speaking poorly of you and hating you? Like, do the athletes, do the entertainers in the sport, do they hate that?
No, I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but I've been a bad guy my entire career here and I love it. I like you take pride in it because I think we're so used to it that we know that when we're getting loud boos, like we just killed it. Like we did exactly what we were supposed to do because it's like if I go out there with you and you're a good guy and I'm a bad guy and I don't get booed, you might not get cheered that loud. Like the more they hate me, the more they can love you.
Okay.
They don't hate me. If they're lukewarm on me and they watch you beat me up, they might be lukewarm on you. Like, you know what I mean? They don't know who to pick. But if they know they have to hate me and maybe you're newer to the scene, by default they're going to like you because they want to see me get my ass kicked. So it's like once you get that emotion out of the crowd, whether it's yay or boo, you're like, "Oh my God, it's working. I did it."
That
You know?
that is so fascinating. I mean, it's just an interesting thing to get like that your job is to have them work either as for you as you can or against you as you can. One question I got for you that is I think applicable to anybody within their job.
Mhm.
How do you magnify that? So you clearly have to do something extra, something out of the ordinary. What do you do to amplify the emotions of people, whether it's good or bad, at a next level perspective?
It's really been a lot of using real life experience, which I know people do a lot in acting. So I guess it's similar to that, where like I'll be sitting here some days when I'm like thinking about my character, pitching a new idea, and I'm like, what do people hate? And it just like certain mannerisms or ways I say things that I know is like so demeaning or demoralizing. Like I'll just like note those things and those even like the phrases I say. Something I say a lot that I got from real life was anytime someone says, "Let me explain something to you," like it's demeaning. Like
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
like telling them they're stupid. Like so I always say like, "Let me make something perfectly clear so you can understand it." And it's like just that
Mm.
one sentence pisses them off because no one likes being talked down to like that. So little things like that, it's really fun for me because you get to like pull from real life and create and just like I assume, you would in television and film.
Yeah, wild how, like, you probably have a list of icks. Like, all the things that people
Yeah.
are like icks, you're like, "Okay, I gotta nail that tonight. I
Yeah,
gotta ick the shit
literally.
out of people." Talk to
Yeah.
me about this, though, like, there's been extensive talk about the whole idea of course, there's scripts, there's plans, there's ideas of what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. How much can you just improv? Can you just use your creativity and, like, go off the script, do what you're supposed to do, or like, do something outrageous to get the fans going? Like, do you do that often? Is that the norm or is that irregular?
Yeah, it's changed over the years depending on, who's in charge of your creative at the moment, but, like, Triple H is big on, like, trusting your gut and, like, trusting you to do what you feel is right, and, like, there's certain moments on live television, like you said, it's live, where only you can feel what would work in that moment. So it's like you might have something on paper, but something else might happen in the moment. And if something comes to you, listen, you can improv as much as you want as long as it works. It's when it doesn't work that it might be like, why'd you go out there and say that? You're supposed to say this. You know what I mean? If you have confidence in the moment and you trust yourself and you know it's going to work, then do it. And you do have that creative liberty.
That's pretty cool.
And that's the fun part too, because you can't control a live audience. They're gonna do what they do, and there's certain things that you kind of just have to be in the moment for to react naturally and organically off of.
It's a wild business. It's so cool, the psychology of it. Now, we're jumping in trading secrets, talk. I see a lot about financials and stuff. Monetizing outside of the ring. We see Logan Paul do it with Pride, $1 billion plus company, according to many valuations. What are some ways that you can monetize outside just the WWE contract?
I think there's so many different ways. I mean, the obvious way is what you said, building your brand and branding opportunities, which a lot of that is offered with WWE as well, with all the brand partnerships that we have. Doing commercials. I mean, there's constantly brand deals. We have a huge deal with C4. So if you get selected to be one of those athletes, that's a really cool opportunity. And then obviously television and film with the likes of John Cena and The Rock, making that transition obviously in a huge way. I love real estate, which is completely unrelated to anything that I built within WWE, but we're making money right now, and eventually one day when I'm 80 years old, I don't want to be getting tossed on my head. I don't think so. And I like real estate because I can control it, and it's something that just over time will help me out.
Give us a small, because of course this is a business podcast, entrepreneurship podcast.
Yeah.
I'll be happy for just a little longer. Give me a small taste of some of the real estate stuff you're doing.
Okay, I just got done flipping and selling a flip in northern New Jersey, a short-term rental in Disney, 2 commercial buildings in North Jersey. One of them is 3 apartments and a storefront. One is 2 office spaces. And then obviously my primary, and then another long-term rental in South Florida.
Amazing. Rocking and rolling, using that cash flow from the sports
Right.
entertainment, set you up for the long term. You got to love it. We had A-Rod on the podcast. He talked about his first contract, or first thing he did was buy an apartment building. It's that type of stuff that creates
So
massive
smart.
wealth, right? Just
So
genius.
smart.
Okay, I got another question for you when we dive into careers and industries. One thing people see are the lights. They see the success. They see your million-plus followers, and they see all the good that comes with it. But with that spotlight, there's also a lot of negative, and there's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that sometimes can be even terrifying. Now, we don't have to get into the details of it by any means, but I saw an article about you having to deal with a stalker who tried to kidnap you, who had this 8-month plot, who was a fan. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I couldn't believe it. And so what I was thinking is, like, how do I actually make this relevant to the podcast? And what's relevant to the podcast here is there is so much shit that happens behind the lights of what people see just on their TV screen. And I'm curious, how is that something you deal with in the entertainment field and overcome, and how big of a challenge has it been for you?
Well, it's one of those things that I laugh because it's just so ridiculous, and it's still kind of unbelievable that it even happened. What was it, like 3 or 4 years ago now? But yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you never think you're going to be in a situation like that. It's still weird to me. Looking at the flip side of it, it's still weird to me if I go to the grocery store and someone that, my local Trader Joe's, there's a guy that works at Trader Joe's and he's a huge fan. And so he always like comes and gives me like new trading cards that I have that came out. He's really sweet. But like, even when that happens, I'm like, oh, wait, really? Like, I'm still surprised when people recognize me. So then to go to the negative side of the coin, when someone watches you on TV and then feels somehow entitled to invade your personal privacy, sending threatening messages, to then take it to the next step and break into your home. Obviously, it's something that nobody can prepare for, whether you're in the spotlight or not in the spotlight. But yeah, I hate to say you take the good with the bad with a situation like that, because that's obviously something you wouldn't wish on anybody, but it's like, it's just all part of it. I don't love the social media aspect of things. If I had it my way, I would probably not have social media, to be completely honest. I have it because I understand the value of it, and I do like connecting with the fans that are great and lovely. And so I don't also want to take that away from them because of a couple bad eggs. But yeah, it can be such a toxic place to be sometimes, especially when, you're on live TV in front of millions. And I mean, you could stutter on one word and it's like trending all night. And it's like, the same way they highlight your victories, they also isolate and highlight your flaws. So I think it's just part of the game. And I've definitely gotten used to it. I don't know that I'll ever be fully okay with it, but it's just part of it.
I commend you for having such a positive sentiment when something like that happens to you. I don't know that I could be as positive as you.
Yeah, it's
Forward
just
getting
it's like it is what it is. Like shit happens, and just it's just I guess it's just my overall mentality on life is like good stuff happens and bad stuff happens, and that's kind of always been like the pattern. And I think it might be for everybody, but it's like you're gonna have your ups and you're gonna have your downs. And I'm grateful that I wasn't hurt, nobody
Mhm.
around me was hurt, or I cared about was hurt. Like we're good, we're good, and life is okay, and so we're moving on. And I'm blessed with like so many amazing things. So if that was something that I had to go through, I'm glad it was me and not my loved ones or anyone that I cared about. So, yeah, we move on.
It's a definition, I think, of glass half full or half empty, so I commend you for having such a
Well,
positive outlook.
like what I think about too is I say I was lucky and people might take that wrong, but I was very lucky because he was stalking me. Unbeknownst to me, he was sending me messages for 4 years. I didn't even know about it. And then he was saying he was gonna come in my house and kidnap me and kill me and all these things. And then he did it and then he got caught. So he's in jail, luckily, where celebrities and people in general struggle with stalkers for years. And because of the way the laws are and because of the way some certain regulations are, you can't even get them arrested because if they don't cross a certain line, you can't get them in trouble. And it's like that to me is a more horroring experience than what I went through. Like, yes, it was horrible, but it's like at least it's taken care of and he's in prison for a long time. Whereas like certain celebrities I know are, being stalked for years and years and people are putting weird things in their mailbox or, knocking on their door in the middle of the night or all these things. And it's like I couldn't imagine having to deal with that consistently.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much room for improvement in that space and
Yeah.
holding people accountable in that space. And I think maybe the last takeaway that I'm having is thankfully, right, you weren't harmed and it all
Yeah.
worked out. And through your experience, you put someone who could be extremely dangerous to society and who knows what else you would have done to someone else in prison for a long time. So again, it's such a great way to look at it. Well, I appreciate you sharing it. It's been so interesting to learn about your career track from the MMA days, from 16 years old, fighting your way to the top as the tag team champion and continuing to fight through some of the adversities like from stalker to ACL injuries and everything in between. I got a quick rapid fire for you, and then we'll get your trading secret. So your trading secret will be something that we can't learn from a professor. We can't learn on a TikTok tutorial or anything on social media, only through what you've been through. So the quick rapid fires, of course, can be WWE related. And I want you to think about the first wrestler that comes to mind. I promise I won't trap you too hard, but we'll start with a softball. Who is the most entertaining wrestler that you've ever been in the ring with or worked with?
I'm gonna go Asuka because when she's screaming in Japanese, it's fascinating and she's one of the best wrestlers that I've ever worked with.
It's amazing to watch her too. Okay, who do you think is the toughest?
Oh, that's a good one.
It could also be someone that you have a fight that you've just seen the way they fight or you see what they do and how they entertain. The toughest.
I'm gonna go my current tag team partner, member of my faction, Shayna Baszler.
Okay, that's a good one. Who hits the hardest? Like when you actually, of course it's fake, but when you heal that, you're like, damn, that hurt.
Me.
I
Me.
like that.
Me.
Great answer. Well, who do you think is the funniest behind the scenes, has the best sense of humor, could literally be a stand-up comic?
Oh, Chelsea Green, hands down.
Oh, she is. I've connected with Chelsea. She's
She's
hilarious.
incredible.
She's unbelievable on stage too. She's great. All right, is like someone in the organization that you would want to date, like your best friend? You're like, this person is just such a good person. I would stamp my approval on that person because they're just that great.
Oh God. None of us. We're all none of the above. We're all crazy. Mm-mm.
Okay, there you go. Honestly, I have more, but I think that's a great way to end it. None of us. Perfect. All right, let's wrap up with your trading secrets. So, something that someone can learn only through what you've been through from your days of 16, put the MMA gloves on, to where you are today. It could be financial, it could be career based, entrepreneurial, but a trading secret that we can only get from you.
Okay. My tried and true. Always be you because everyone else is already taken. And I'm going to elaborate on that because it's so important to me. And I think it's the reason why I am where I am today. Like you can't waste any time trying to fit in a box you're not going to fit in. Like we were all created so individually, so different for a particular reason. And just because you haven't found your why yet, or your thing yet, or the thing that you're the master of yet, like, don't give up trying, because there's something out there for every single one of us. And it took me years of going through different sports, careers, and jobs to find what my thing is and my why in life in general. So keep looking, because there's something for everyone.
I love that. And I think even through your journey, we know that there are certain systems that try and fit you right in a square. But you quickly said, no, school's not for me. I'm going to go find something else. And there are so many people that are listening to this, they're in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, that are still in that box. So I think you're a perfect example of don't be in the box other people put you in. Find your own box, do it your way, and no other way. We get one shot, we get one leg. So Daria, thank you so much for being on this episode of Trading Secrets. Where can everyone find everything you have going on?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jason. I've been a fan of your podcast for a long time. I love your talk about business and everything financial related. It's so cool. You can find me on Instagram at Sonya Deville WWE. Same on Twitter, same on TikTok. And yeah. And every Monday on Monday Night Raw.
Every Monday on Monday Night Raw, and whether you're tweeting or you're there live or you're doing anything, you can be loud cheering for her, you can be loud cheering against her. Just be one of the two and don't be in the middle. That's what we learned here. Daria, thank you so much for being on this episode of Trading Secrets, and we look forward to watching you in the ring.
Thanks, Jason.